The night she walked out of his mansion, rain poured as if the sky itself cried for her. Valerie's footsteps echoed on the wet pavement, each step taking her farther from the man who once promised her forever. Just hours before, Daniel had looked her in the eyes with a cruel calmness that shattered something deep inside her. He had called her a mistake, someone unworthy of his world. Those words hit her harder than any storm could. She left quietly without defending herself because her voice trembled too much to hold her pride. The city lights blurred through her tears as she whispered to herself, "One day, I'll prove I was never nothing." She didn't know how or when, but she knew this pain would not be her ending. Back in his penthouse, Daniel stood by the window, watching the same rain. For a moment he felt something sharp and unfamiliar, regret, but he buried it under pride and routine. To him, feelings were weaknesses, and he was a man who never looked back. He told himself she would forget him, move on, and fade away like others before. But that night, his chest felt heavier than usual. Miles away in a small rented room, Valerie sat on the edge of her bed, clutching her stomach. Her heart ached, not just from heartbreak, but from the secret she carried, a tiny life beginning inside her. The same man who broke her would never know that in her silence, she carried both his past and her future. And this time she swore she wouldn't break again. The mornings were the hardest. Valerie woke before sunrise, her body weak but her spirit burning. The tiny apartment was cold, its cracked walls whispering loneliness. Yet every time she felt her babies move, warmth filled her heart. She worked long hours at a small cafe, taking orders with a quiet smile, hiding her growing belly under loose clothes. No one knew her story. No one guessed that the woman serving coffee once stood beside a man who owned half the city. Every coin she earned went toward a future she refused to let slip away. Each sleepless night, she would whisper promises to the children in her womb, promises of safety, strength, and love. But behind her determination, fear crept in. There were nights when she broke down, holding her stomach and crying softly, terrified of what awaited her. Still, she never reached out to Daniel, not once. Pride kept her silent, and love for her unborn twins kept her going. Meanwhile, Daniel's world looked perfect on the outside. His company grew. His name appeared in magazines. His smile never faltered in photos. But when he was alone, silence filled his glass and steel penthouse like a ghost. He'd catch himself thinking of her laugh, her kindness, and something inside him twisted. Yet he convinced himself he was better off. He had money, control, and power, everything except peace. And miles away, Valerie was building something more precious than any empire. Resilience born from pain, and hope stronger than the man who once destroyed her. 4 years later, the city looked the same, but Valerie was not. The shy, broken woman who once trembled under Daniel's shadow had turned into someone unrecognizable, confident, calm, and radiant with purpose. She walked into life each morning with 2 little boys by her side, Luke and Dylan, her reason to keep breathing when everything once felt impossible. Her days were filled with chaos and laughter, her nights with stories and dreams. She had started a small online business designing children's books, her creativity and resilience turning into success. She was not rich, but she was fulfilled. Each smile from her sons reminded her how far she had come from the girl who walked into the rain with nothing but tears. One chilly evening, as she tucked the boys into bed, Luke looked up at her and asked softly, Mom, why don't we have a dad? The question stung like cold wind. Valerie paused, brushing a hand through his hair. Because, she whispered, we have love, and that's enough. But deep down, her heart ached with memories she had tried to bury. That same night, miles away, Daniel attended another charity gala. Cameras flashed, people smiled, and his perfect world shimmered. Yet behind that mask, loneliness still echoed. Success couldn't fill the silence of an empty home. He often caught himself wondering what became of the woman he pushed away, but he quickly drowned those thoughts in work and pride. Neither knew that fate was quietly arranging a meeting neither could escape. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind that doesn't warn you your life is about to change. Valerie was at the grocery store with Luke and Dylan, her hands full of small things, milk, bread, crayons for their art project. The twins ran ahead, laughing, their voices bright and full of joy. She was smiling, distracted by their giggles, when her cart bumped into someone. She turned, ready to apologize, and froze. Standing before her was Daniel Sterling. The man who once shattered her heart now looked at her with disbelief. His polished calm cracked the moment his eyes landed on the two boys who stood beside her. For a few seconds, time stood still. The twins stared back at the tall man with the same piercing blue eyes. Daniel's breath caught, the resemblance too perfect to ignore. "Valerie?" he whispered, his voice unsteady for the first time in years. Her pulse raced, but she held his gaze, calm, composed, stronger than she ever imagined she could be. "Hello, Daniel," she said quietly, her tone steady yet distant, as if the wound had long healed. The silence between them carried years of unspoken words. Daniel's chest tightened as realization hit him. Those children weren't strangers. They were his reflection. Regret surged through him like a wave, but Valerie didn't flinch. She gathered her boys and walked past him, leaving Daniel standing among spilled groceries and questions he could no longer ignore. For the first time in his life, power meant nothing. Only the past he couldn't undo. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. The faces of the twins haunted him, their eyes, their smiles, the familiar way one of them tilted his head when thinking. He sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights glimmering far below, feeling something he had long forgotten, remorse. He had built skyscrapers, won battles in boardrooms, and crushed rivals with ease, but he couldn't stop the trembling in his hands. For years he thought cutting Valerie out of his life made him strong. But seeing her again, radiant and peaceful, surrounded by children who carried his blood, made him realize how wrong he had been. For the first time he understood that success meant nothing without love. Meanwhile, Valerie lay awake, staring at the ceiling as the quiet breathing of her sons filled the room. The past she buried had resurfaced, stirring feelings she didn't want to face. Seeing Daniel again had shaken her more than she admitted, not because she wanted him back, but because she saw something different in his eyes. Guilt, maybe even pain. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She had built a life on her own, piece by piece, without his help. She had no desire for revenge, only peace. Days passed, but Daniel couldn't stay away. He showed up at the cafe near her office, pretending it was coincidence, his eyes searching for the courage to speak. When he finally did, his voice broke slightly. "Valerie?" "I didn't know." She looked at him calmly and said, "You never cared enough to ask." And in that moment, he realized forgiveness wasn't something he could demand. It was something he had to earn. The next morning, Daniel stood outside her office, holding a small paper bag and nerves he hadn't felt in years. Inside was a box of the same pastries Valerie used to love, the ones she always bought when she had good news. He waited, unsure if she would even stop. When she finally stepped out, her surprise was clear, but her eyes stayed guarded. "Why are you here, Daniel?" she asked softly. He hesitated, then said the words he should have said years ago. "I was wrong. About you. About everything. I thought power made me strong, but it only made me empty. You made me human once, and I threw that away." His voice shook as he added, "I just want to be part of their lives if you'll let me." Valerie's heart raced, but she stayed quiet, watching him. The man before her wasn't the ruthless billionaire she remembered. He looked human, tired, broken, and honest. "They don't need wealth," she said. "They need kindness, stability, love." Daniel nodded, eyes glistening. "Then teach me," he whispered. Weeks turned into months. Slowly, Valerie allowed him small moments, school visits, park days, late-night calls. Luke and Dylan began to smile when they saw him, unaware of the storm that had once divided them. Valerie still guarded her heart, but she couldn't deny the change in him. One evening, as they watched the sunset together, Daniel turned to her. "You were right," he said quietly. "Worthless was never the word for you. You were the reason I finally became something better." Valerie smiled faintly. "Then don't thank me," she whispered. "Thank the storm. It taught us both how to rebuild." And for the first time, peace replaced the silence that had haunted them for years.